Some terms are 2, some are 4.
They're just lucky I'm here. They're so lucky I'm here.
I'd like to maybe call this meeting to order. Quorum of the Nibley City Council has assembled at Nibley City Hall at 6:30 to do a joint meeting with the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee. And the council meeting to order and ask consent of the council to appoint myself as Chair Pro Temp for this meeting. Any objection? All right, seeing no objection, council member me is the pro temp. And we have council member Norman Larson, Garrett Mansell, and Aaron Mann present. And then I'll turn the time over to President Walker to call her committee to order.
Thank you. Excuse me. We will call to order for the Parks and Rec Committee. Kendall Welker, I'm here. Sarah Anderson. Here. And make sure to speak into the microphone so those online can hear. Here. Joshua Nelson.
Here.
Manny Labus.
Here.
Michael Stokes.
Here.
John Hayden. Not here.
John is sick today.
Vincent Cordero is not here. Jason Clark.
Here.
And Caitlin Madsen.
Here.
Thank you. All right. And we'd like to recognize those that are here joining us, council members and our city staff. Thank you. All right, so we have the approval of our minutes from February and our March agenda. Is there any questions from our minutes last month? And is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
And Michael, you second it? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, minutes are passed, and then the agenda in front of you for tonight's meeting. Any questions? All right, is there a motion?
Motion approved.
Michael motions. A second?
I second.
Jason and Manny. Just kidding. Choose one, put their name in. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, passed unanimously. All right, and to our public comment period. Heather Godfrey, will you come up and give us your comment, please?
Hi, my name is Heather Godfrey. I actually live at 9050 South, 200 East in Paradise. I'm a business owner in Hiram. My children attend Heritage Elementary in Nibley. So I stay on the south end. I just wanted to express support for the indoor rec center. I have 9 children. I'm also on the Cash Water Polo board. We are an aquatic family. We swim, we play water polo. This valley needs this rec center. I know there's concern about money. Obviously, that's, I'm sure, most people's greatest concern. But we live in a day and age where we have access to grants, funds, and this valley does have money. So I think really some great opportunities to think outside the box, allow people to get in some kind of an incentive program. You bring a $10,000 sponsor, you get whatever, a free membership for a year. You bring a $500,000 sponsor, you bring $1 million, whatever your limits. This doesn't have to just be funded through tax money. There is money, there are grants, there are people willing to put this here. Mental health, obesity, there's 1,000 studies of the need for this indoor rec center. We cannot compete. Because we play water polo, we are not a sanctioned sport in high school yet. It's on the board or on the docket. Hopefully in the next couple of years, it gets sanctioned. You're out of pools. We cannot compete up here. My daughters, I have 2 daughters that have been to the Junior Olympics in water polo. We have a gold medal and a bronze medal in the Junior Olympics in Texas. We can play and we can compete as far as skill wise, but we do not get the pool time. We need more pools. We need something to do in the winter. This rec center benefits every family, not just of us, those of us with children still, but your elderly. Your mall is gone. There is no more free walking in the winter. You do not have places for the elderly to go. You need this rec center. Every Cache Valley is behind. We're growing exponentially. Hiram is growing. Nibley is growing. You have, we need better healthcare providers. We need more healthcare providers. We need more excellent education teachers. We need the university. What are you incentivizing them with? If I'm moving from Denver and I have access to rec centers, I have access to indoor facilities, and you want me to come here with what? You need this rec center. You need it to bring people here. You need it for the excellence that every citizen of Cache Valley deserves. And they do deserve well. It's a beautiful place to live. The mountains are wonderful. The small town atmosphere is wonderful, but we need these facilities to bring in more options for your citizens. And it can be done. We can have a really fantastic rec center. There's beautiful rec centers across this entire state. Just down south in South Davis, all the way down to St. George, which has 2. Cedar City, Farmington, Springville, Provo, Midway. All of them have beautiful rec centers that serve their communities, and they serve them well, and they're used all the time. I have been to every one of those. Some of them have pools. Some of them I've been for volleyball before the boys teams were sanctioned. I've played in all of these rec centers. They serve their communities well. We need one here. I fully support it. My family supports it. I would support a bond, and I will support the tax increase for it. So thanks.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Ben Madsen.
I wasn't sure what to do about heckling Caitlin. She's my sister-in-law. So Ben Madsen, I'm at 489 Sheridan, just down the street here. I feel like I wasn't sure what to expect in this. Heather laid it out, flat out. We need this. She kept saying, we need this. I don't know if there's any other way to put it than that. Similar to Heather, I've got kids in water polo, but I've got kids that swim. We've got our 10-year-old took first place in 2 events at the state championships this past couple weeks ago. We don't get full time for the water polo team. It's such a hard balance between all those teams. We need that, but it's not just about the pool, right? Like, we want the pool because the water polo team needs pool time. We get destroyed by Kearns because they have access to 13 pools. We get killed by Olympus every time we go down because we just don't get the pool time. The kids don't get the ability to compete. Even though they've got really high talent and really high IQ, we get beat because we don't have the stamina in the pool. But it's not just about the pool. We have the best soccer program debatably around. It destroys everybody. We've got a gazillion soccer fields. We need something indoors because the soccer fields run only a couple of months a year. The rest of the time, we're just watering lawns. The fields get used for stuff, but we need something indoors. We need a track to run on. We need courts to play on, basketball, volleyball, racquetball. I'm a racquetball player, so don't forget about the racquetball court. I need something down here. But yeah, you go down along Wasatch Front. Every town has a rec center, and Cache Valley is missing it bad. You go down to Kearns. Yes, we can't compete with the oval down there. We're never going to compete with that. But we can provide our citizens with something that they deserve. And yeah, if it takes a tax increase, let's do it. And some people are going to be pissed about that. But legit, we are underserving the community by not having something. So thanks for going into this. You guys have done a lot of work. I love the surveys. I know you guys have spent a lot of time. So thank you for all of that. Let's move forward. Let's get this done. We need it. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Does anyone else want to make a comment? Anyone up here have comments? Yes, just state your name and where you live would be great.
I apologize for coming in a little bit late, so I missed the beginning. I couldn't sign up. My name is Adria Davis, and I am a resident of Millville. And I was late because I was taking my child to water polo at Utah State because we don't have a pool local. So I apologize for that. I just want to speak, and I didn't hear the beginning of her remarks. So if I have repeated something that was said, forgive me for that also. I just want to speak to the need for a pool. And I realize there's other things that are going into a rec center. But the need for a pool, you may or may not know some of the statistics or what the reality of it looks like. I do have a child that plays water polo, and she's also done swim as well. And we are highly competing for pool time. I think that was already mentioned, but the water polo team has 7 different teams. I know the swim team has 7 or more. I don't know how many numbers they actually have, but a significant amount as well. And that's just the club team. So we have water polo club, we have swim, that's club. We have the swim teams of Mountain Crest and Ridgeline that are all using the same pool. So it is highly used. Our practices are 4 days a week, year round. Swim is 5 days a week, year round. And so it's definitely something that would be utilized. So the minute that it opened, it would be guaranteed be in use already because there is so much need for it. So I also do support a tax increase for it. I wish there was some way we can get it funded or help pay for it because it is in need. So just wanted to let you know that the rest of the community outside of Nibley is looking for this and is in need of it as well. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Sure appreciate it. Any comments, questions, concerns?
I guess maybe can I say thank you so much for coming here to our meeting, and Nibley has definitely, I feel like, been a driving force. Also, for those that have come from outside of Nibley, go to your city council meetings as well. We are talking with neighboring communities and making sure that they know that what their citizens are wanting and that they are supportive of it is going to help tremendously. So thank you.
Thank you, Caitlin. Okay. All right. Agenda item number 4, indoor recreation feasibility study survey results report, including discussion and consideration. So this will be done remotely. And there she is.
All right. Thank you, Kendall. We have Whitney Ward on the line. She just waved to us here. She's with VCBO. They're the consultant doing the study, the indoor recreation study. So we'll let her share her screen. She has a lot of great data to share with us, and we're excited to see what we can learn.
All right. Can everybody see my screen all right?
Yes, we can, Whitney. Thank you.
Excellent. So this has been an incredible outpouring of feedback from the community. Right now, the survey is still live because there, again, are some neighborhood communities who have gotten the word out a little bit later than others. Right now, we're at 4,700 responses. And so what we're sharing tonight is a sort of a moment in time from last Wednesday that recorded the information, and we've seen the trends continuing. So we're confident when the survey closes, there won't be any big surprises based off of what we're sharing, but we did want to let you know that it is still open and feedback is still coming in. But we wanted to understand the community's perspective on recreation and aquatics, see what the priorities are, and to see what, as we've talked about already this evening, what the appetite might be for bonding or funding support for a community recreation facility. So with that, I'll go ahead and jump in here. I have about 18 slides, so I don't want to take up too much time. And I'll try to be as clear as possible as I go through this, but of course, if you have any questions or need clarifications, please stop me. So the first thing we wanted to do was understand the perspective of the value of recreation. If people felt like it brought a value beyond health and well-being to the community. And what we heard in the about 4,400 responses that are captured in this question is that the vast majority of respondents do find value in recreation, both for improved health, physical health, but also mental health, and specifically mental and physical health for youth were key drivers as well. And so we thought that that was great feedback from the community about the value. You can see over on the right-hand side, some of the other comments, again, are very consistent with what we've heard. A goal for indoor recreation during the winter months, the ability to build community and make connections with others, supporting health and well-being. And there are concerns that were expressed, increased taxes, sort of government competing with private market, and opportunities that exist in town not being diminished. And so you'll hear this consistently through the presentation where generally we've had very positive responses, but there are concerns, and we want to make sure that we're sharing those effectively. So we then asked folks just to understand where they were recreating or exercising today. What amenities and areas do they seek for their physical fitness? And what we saw resoundingly is that the community is using public facilities currently. So you'll see here public parks, public trails, and open space are the two highest utilized amenities by respondents to the survey, and then public sports and fitness facilities and home fitness round out the top four. The interesting thing here was about a quarter of the respondents are using some level of private youth or adult fitness program. So the next question that we asked is holistically, where does the community see a need for services? And again, there were three elements that rose to the top here. Not surprisingly, based off of the feedback tonight, swimming and aquatics eked into first place as the #1 priority from respondents, followed by adult sport, recreation, and fitness programs and youth sport, recreation, and fitness programs. Some of the interesting feedback here was community education, senior recreation were a little bit lower than we might see in other communities. And then we did also want to note very clearly here that there were about 352 of the 4,600 respondents who did not support a taxpayer-funded recreation center. And for reference, it's 7.6%. And so as we go through these numbers again, you will see in the public comments and in the feedback that there are concerns, and the folks who are uninterested from the beginning are about 7.6% of survey respondents. All right.
Whitney, as you're transitioning slides, could you just
Yeah.
share with us how significant the response rate is in comparison with the study you did in Ogden? I think that will help the.
Yes. So we're just finishing up construction right now on the Marshall White Center in Ogden. And this is a community recreation center nestled into the heart of downtown Ogden. And we did a similar survey, and we were pleased with the result of just over 900 responses. So for Ogden City to have 900 and for the south end of Cache Valley to have over 4,500 responses is pretty incredible. So again, great responses from the community. The next series of questions, we broke the questions out based off of their response to this one. So for example, if they said sports and recreation were important, then we asked them more questions about what that meant to them. If folks said swimming and aquatics was important, we asked them more questions, and so on and so forth. So the first question was for folks to rank the recreation and fitness activities that they thought would be most valuable for the community. And the #1 item was indoor court space. So courts that could support basketball, volleyball, pickleball, etc. The second most important was open access cardio and strength training equipment, followed by weightlifting area and a dedicated indoor area for walking and jogging. The top 5 were rounded out with indoor field sports. And again, this is really consistent with what people said were their priorities, which is adult fitness and youth fitness programs. And so these top 5 really represent all of those key priorities. We did want to make sure that we were listing in here the 10 options that were available so you can see the group fitness, gymnastics, indoor baseball, softball came down further on the list. And then we did have a really strong response in the other category where people wanted to make sure we knew that a pool was important. So More than half of our other comments were to note that folks wanted an indoor pool, and there was another 100 or so of our 780 other comments that were focused on an indoor ice rink. And so again, pretty good alignment with priorities and great feedback from this question. The next question went into aquatics, and there are a handful of questions that we asked about pools. So the first question, similar to recreation, was what are your priorities for aquatics? And again, here you can see that lap swimming and learn to swim programs, which are both a traditional rectilinear pool, were the number 1 and 2 priorities. Then you start to see the zero depth entry beach area for small children, water slides. So the fun things for kids of all ages came in 3rd and 4th, with aquatic fitness coming in after that, and then lazy river. So a good combination again of aquatics that support all ages and all abilities in their needs. To follow up on the pool question, we asked folks what their priority was around indoor year-round pools, outdoor seasonal pools, or both indoor and outdoor. And we learned a life lesson. If you ask both, most people will say both. So people like the idea of both of the pools, but again, a strong priority for indoor year-round pools over outdoor seasonal pools. And of the over 1,500 respondents who wanted an indoor year-round pool, more than 700 of them noted that they would use that on a weekly basis. And in total, we ended up with over 1,200 using it more than a couple of times a month. So again, a really good feedback here for the potential use for indoor pools. We also asked people if they would be willing to pay for the use of an indoor pool. Indoor pools are one of the more expensive components of any indoor recreation facility for a range of reasons, and they often require a stipend or a supplemental funding to help pay for the lifeguards and the facility operations associated with pools. So we asked folks who wanted an indoor pool if they would be willing to pay an additional tax to help support that pool. And of the folks who wanted a pool, the majority said yes, they would be willing to pay a tax. The thing that we really don't know, and the reason I've circled maybe here, is we're not sure if people are lukewarm about a pool, if they would be willing to pay for it. So this is something that we want to dig into and understand in more detail as we move into our future concepts. After pools, we then asked about community spaces. And with these community spaces, sorry, let me just get rid of this here. With these community spaces, we heard that activity and event spaces are the most important or the highest priority. So you'll see medium event spaces for gatherings up to 50 people is number 1. And then birthday party spaces for 15 to 20 people, art rooms came in 3rd, and then hourly childcare came in 4th. And again, spaces for the community to gather was pretty consistent across these comments and feedback. And just to note, of the 134 other comments that we received, 72 of them highlighted that they did not want the facility. So that's still part of that 352 or that 7.6% that we referenced earlier in the study. And I just realized I forgot to fill in the blank here. So after we asked about the different programs and services with recreation, aquatics, and community support services, we asked folks if a recreation and wellness center with their desired amenities were built, how often would they use that facility? And what we heard here is a resounding people will use it and they will use it often. In fact, I'm going to fill in the blank here really quickly. Over 3,000 of the 4,000 people who responded to this survey said that they would use the facility weekly, if not more. And so again, really good feedback from folks. We then wanted to be very clear and transparent about the potential for a bond or a property tax increase to help financially support a new community recreation and wellness center. So we asked folks if they would support a tax increase. And you can see here that about 75% said probably, yeah, we would support it, that this is something that's important to us. And then we asked them how much they would be willing to pay. And the mean was about $20 a month, the median 15. So taking the lower of the two to be conservative, what we've heard so far is people are willing to pay about $180 a year per household to help support community recreation.
Is that high or low?
It's
Where does that fit in other things you've seen?
So that actually is quite good. Now, the question that we need to dig into and what we're going to be exploring more in the future is what does that mean with different population bases? So $180 a year per household is a really impactful amount of money, potentially, depending on how many houses we can spread that out over, right? And so we're going to be working with a bonding specialist to understand what that means for the Nibley community, or if this were to grow outside of Nibley, what that could impact and how big of a facility that would help support. And then the next question we asked, because this is something that we heard pretty consistently through our discussions, is that location matters. And so we asked people how far they would be willing to drive to go to a new community recreation and wellness center. And you can see the majority of people would like to keep it within 15 minutes of where they live. And so that's another point that will be important to look at. What's the reach from a potential site, and how many people could we hit, and how effectively can this facility be located to serve the south end of the valley? Again, really consistently in public outreach that we've done outside of this survey, we have heard that location is very important and that the south end of the valley feels underserved by the existing facilities because they're mostly up in Logan and North Logan. And then another couple of points that I think are helpful to understand are sort of where Nibley maybe stands out from the broad survey. So as I mentioned, there are now 4,700 responses to this survey. We have about 700 responses specifically from Nibley residents. And so we took a look at what Nibley residents said and how that compared to others within the survey. And what we heard or saw was that senior recreation and community education had a little bit of a higher desire in Nibley than in some of the other communities. Additionally, more people wanted both indoor and outdoor pools. And this is a great number, 95% of the people who said that they wanted an indoor pool were willing to support a property tax increase to help support that indoor pool for Nibley City. And 75% of Nibley residents, again, would support a property tax increase. And the percentage that Nibley residents are willing to pay is slightly higher than the average of the survey at $20 a month. So again, consistent with what you've heard tonight, it is something that folks are looking for and very much interested in. We also used a very technical tool. We had over 80 pages of comments from survey takers. And so with the help of ChatGPT, we were able to really effectively summarize the feedback that we've received. And there were some additional considerations or suggestions that people wanted us to think about as we go through the feasibility study. One is, how can we integrate outdoor amenities and features into the recreation center or the site to make sure that it complements what exists in the community? Folks want to make sure that we're designing with the community in mind, offering family-oriented programs and something for everybody, regardless of their age range and ability. And then finally, folks had a range of recommendations of other facilities that they liked that could be referenced and considered in the study and design process. And again, we like a lot of these facilities as well. So this was great feedback. There were concerns, as we've noted. The biggest concern is funding and tax increase. There are a number of people who, as they went through the survey, noted that they're concerned about raising taxes, about what that will mean for them individually and financially, and if there are opportunities for other funding resources, public-private partnerships, grants, or other opportunities to help reduce the burden on the taxpayers. Again, financial sustainability and efficiency were some concerns. Some folks recommended, and this will be part of the evaluation, that there might be a fee structure that allows for folks who aren't paying or contributing via property tax to have a different fee structure than those who are contributing through property taxes to the facility. And then there are also concerns about making sure that it's accessible, attainable, and not overcrowded. And this is something that is worth considering because there are not a lot of recreation opportunities right now in the south end of the valley for indoor recreation. And so it's something that I think is, again, valuable feedback that we want to keep in mind. But overall, as we've noted, by the more than 90% positive response rate, there are absolutely people who are very excited for and supportive of this potential facility. Indoor aquatics are very much a strong priority. Ice rink and indoor sports facilities, especially youth sports, rose to the top as a priority. Again, affordability and accessibility is something that repeats itself both in the supportive areas as well. And then the goal to have flexible multi-use spaces that can adapt and evolve over time, and something that's very much focused on the south end of the valley. And so from all of this information, we've gone through and made a recommendation of the key priorities from the feedback in the survey. And so the first two key priorities are providing effective spaces for adult sports recreation and fitness and youth sports recreation and fitness. And so from an adult perspective, the key programs that we typically see are open access cardio and strength training, weightlifting area, dedicated indoor area for walking and jogging, and group fitness rooms. For youth sports, the priority spaces that we would typically see and recommend would be indoor court and indoor field space. And that can allow for, of course, open recreation as well as youth sports programs. And then, of course, aquatics is a priority. With the feedback and the prioritization from the survey, right now, the focus points are a pool that allows for lap swimming and learn to swim programs, a zero depth entry play pool, and an element that allows for fun and entertainment for youth and teens. They're sometimes the hardest to please. And so things like a water slide or a ninja course or some sort of engaging element would be important. And then finally, there are some additional considerations that maybe didn't come out of the survey, but are things that we may want to think about as the study progresses. One of these would be community and senior center programs. If there is a need for community space that could serve a broader need to enhance the facility and, again, provide a strong use space for all ages and generations within the community. The outdoor recreation integration is a great opportunity that came out of this survey. And then there's also an opportunity with healthcare integration and future partnerships and even potentially funding opportunities to really turn this into a recreation and wellness campus. And so while that didn't come from the community survey, could be an opportunity that we may want to consider as the study progresses. So with that, you guys did not have a ton of questions. So I'll just maybe pause here and even stop sharing and see if there are any questions or anything that you guys want to circle back to.
Whitney, it appears that they're mulling it over a little bit.
I like this. Continue to mull.
Well, we're put on the spot tonight. Usually our meetings have not them over there. And we're sitting around tables and we're making jokes. So we're like a little bit out of our comfort zone for a little bit. I really think city council should be up here. They're probably more comfortable. But anyway, so we're just, digesting the situation too.
Absolutely. Again, just to Chad's point, I think some of the key takeaways from our perspective, incredible community participation, positive and productive feedback, and good guidance as we move into the next steps of looking at different concept options for the indoor recreation center.
Whitney, this is Erin. I have one quick question. Last week you were talking about Ballard King and
Yes.
maybe I wonder if you could explain a little bit what they're going to be telling us in terms of like what amenities can our population and demographics and size support. Maybe you could explain that a little bit just so we understand as we're getting ready to get bond information ready. How do we know what we should be presenting for the bond?
That is a great question, and thank you for queuing that up, Erin. So Ballard King is a consultant, and they are a national recreation specialist, and they do sort of market analysis and operational impact. And so they're going to be coming out and doing a deep dive into Cache County recreation opportunities, services, programs, public and private. And what they look at is what can be and is typically supported by different sizes of communities from a recreation amenity perspective. So for example, how many ice rinks can be supported in Cache County? How many indoor pools are needed to serve the needs of the population base based off of average national and local data, right? And so for example, you may hear a statement of a community of 35,000 people can absolutely support an indoor recreation center. But that indoor recreation center may not include indoor aquatics, indoor ice, and indoor dry recreation. And so they'll help us pinpoint where you are as a county, where you are on the south side of the valley from recreation services and offerings, where the gaps are in the services, and therefore there are opportunities to provide that, and also where maybe the needs are already being met within the community. So we're excited to get that information and that data to complement the survey. We don't want to dismiss what we're hearing from the community in this survey. It's so important to just note that this feedback is absolutely vital to make sure we're hitting what the community is looking for from program and amenity perspective. We just want to then balance that with some data points on what is typical for different communities of different sizes and configurations. And that will also complement the Cache County study that is occurring as well to make sure that all of the needs are being met and that they're being considered across the county.
One thing, Erin, that I might add to that really appealed to the consultant team that VCBO offered. Ballard and King has on their staff people that have worked in recreation facilities, and they'll be creating a pro forma. So at some point we'll have a preferred concept, a general idea that includes a number of elements. And they'll take that and run numbers and tell us what it takes to operate that facility ongoing. And that's a very important question, especially for, someone in your position looking at budgetary numbers, someone in my position looking at, hey, how do we sustain this? And that was very appealing to me as we looked at this proposal. And so that's another piece of what Ballard and King will do.
Thank you, Chad, for noting that.
When does the survey close?
Hopefully soon.
Hopefully soon.
They have so much
Chad,
to process.
I was
Yeah.
going to say, Chad actually has been doing a great job at reaching out to the neighboring communities and making sure as they express interest in participating in the survey, that they have a reasonable amount of time for their residents to engage. We typically like to have about 3 weeks at least for folks to be able to provide feedback from the time they hear about the survey. And so we're hoping in the next week or so that it'll be able to close, but Chad will report on some of those neighboring community discussions here in a little while.
Yeah, we'll definitely discuss that. As you're gathering thoughts, I did have a question, Whitney, and I'd never considered it, but how do you foresee indoor recreation integrating with a recreation facility? I hadn't considered that before. What does that look like?
Oh, do you mean outdoor recreation?
Yeah, outdoor recreation, yeah.
So that could be a couple of different things. It could be, and as you guys have planned in your recreation master plan, it's an integration of outdoor field space that could complement and be used by and support the indoor recreation center and the programs offered within the recreation facility. It could also be trail and bicycle network connections. And so looking at where the planned bike and trail connections are in the community, making sure that they can intersect with the property and people can walk, ride their bike, and of course, drive to the facility, but really integrating it with the broader outdoor recreation offerings of the community.
Thank you, Whitney.
I guess I have one question. How feasible is an indoor outdoor pool given our climate? I've seen it, in warmer climates. And maybe I'm trying to think if it's the Kearns that kind of has an indoor outdoor, but it seems like with the weather and having an insulated building but that might be something that you've seen before or considered. Is that even feasible for this climate?
It is feasible. We would recommend two distinct facilities if that was the direction that you went in. One that was an indoor pool and a separate one that is an outdoor pool. But one of the challenges, as I noted, is that pools are expensive. And so as a part of the Ballard King study, we're excited to see what the need is for outdoor aquatics versus indoor aquatics and have that help complement this study. We would anticipate, based off of the community feedback, that the indoor pool is a priority right now over the outdoor pool. So if funding is limited, I think that would be maybe how the options may emerge. Would be a facility option one, baseline lowest cost funding would maybe not have an aquatic component. The next step up would have an indoor pool component, as that's what we've heard is the priority for the community. And then if there's opportunity beyond that for both an indoor and an outdoor pool, that would then be another step up from there.
Whitney, I'd probably just say we talked about this a little bit, and maybe if you want to go over a little bit of the numbers on that, as far as some of the projections we talked about, not specifics, I guess, too much, but you showed us here's the potential ideas that we could put in and what it would cost. I know one of the things that we covered was based on what people say that they're willing to pay. If we're just talking about a Nibley area, we're way more than double that if we were to build a facility that shows the types of things that we're talking about right now. And maybe that's worth discussing a little bit.
Yes. So, again, pools they're just expensive. They cost a lot to build. They cost money to operate. And so, to go from the indoor recreation option as a baseline, right now we're probably targeting about a $25 million facility. If we add a pool, an indoor pool component to that, we're probably looking at about a $35 million facility for upfront construction. And so this is something that is going to be really important as we go back to the community and as we talk to the bond specialist, is to understand what the citizens of Nibley could afford if Nibley City were to pursue this on your own. And then what would that look like if other neighboring communities came and joined forces to look at a special district, a recreation district. And Chad will speak to this in a few minutes here as well. So again, big picture, high level numbers, but it's important just to have that sort of in mind as we start to think about just the cost of facilities.
So on your, you said you had about 4,700 people on the questionnaire, and about 700 of them were from Nibley. Is it possible we can get the results of those 700, like separate them to see how they do it? Yes. Okay,
absolutely. Thanks. Yep. And I have shared that with Chad, that report, but it's probably been about 3 weeks. So I will send him an updated one after this meeting.
Thank you.
Of course.
Chad, are we planning on publishing this anywhere, or is this just internal to this group?
Yeah, good question. So this is on YouTube. This presentation will be archived, so it'll be available for anyone to watch. And I imagine that we'll post this to the Rec Center Study info webpage for anyone to take a look at.
Okay, awesome.
Chad, I don't know if you already have this, maybe something we'll talk about more, but we had also, as a result of the dollars, talked about what that looks like in terms of sharing control or ownership if we were to try to add more people in, like a district, special district, or just do it with Hiram or something like that, and how that also grows the size and the cost. I don't know if that's something we will talk about or.
Yeah, that's Michael, you're always ahead of us. That is on the agenda, and we will address that in general terms.
Okay.
And that's something that this body will need to decide in terms of giving staff direction on what to pursue, what to explore with other communities. So yeah, it's really a great question, and that's exactly where we're at right now, in terms of making decisions in direction. Yeah, great question.
Hey, Whitney, in it was one of your last slides when you kind of ranked things 1, 2, 3 with adult sports, youth sports, and then the pool. I'm wondering how that was, I mean, you don't have to get super technical, how that was calculated with previous questions. I know it was super close between those 3, how that ranking came to be, because the pool just kind of outweighed it nudged it out, I feel like.
Yep.
And how that ranking is determined.
Admittedly, that was a little bit of experience coupled with what we heard from the survey. And with that, as I had just mentioned with some of the budget numbers we're looking at, you do get a little bit more recreation bang for your buck, if you will. You serve more users at a community level, oftentimes with an indoor dry recreation versus aquatics. And so that's why the adult and youth fitness programs rose to the top of that list. Now, that doesn't mean that that's the right priority for Nibley, and we'll pull that information out as the concepts are developed.
Okay, thank you.
One thing we might mention in terms of adult recreation is the recent Parks and Recreation Master Plan. One of the findings was that we do a great job on servicing our, excuse me, our youth. We have a great soccer program, has been mentioned, in many other programs, but we haven't offered a lot for adults, and so there's kind of a missing piece there. So that would kind of align with what Whitney's talking about.
And I think the other thing that is important to note is community recreation centers are typically designed, again, for families of all ages and generations. And it is important to make sure that, for example, if you're a parent and you're bringing your kids to an activity, that there's something for you to do while you're there as well, and to take advantage of the opportunity for recreation while your kid is at a basketball camp or whatever may be happening. And so while the square footage of a gymnasium or an indoor turf area might be a little bit bigger, we don't want that to come at the expense of maybe something for the adults or the senior citizens in the community as well. And so that also played into the rankings and the recommendations.
One point to that we've talked about before also is the extended use or the different hours that something can be used because of the different groups that it caters to. We've discussed people who are willing to drive all the way to Ogden for 1 a.m. games to participate in adult sports, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys would be nuts.
Now we know there's a market for it, right?
The other thing, to Whitney's point, a well-built community recreation center should serve the entire community, not just a single demographic or single population. And that's one clear difference between community recreation and a private facility. Often the private facility caters to one smaller group, and it's often one that generates the greatest profit for them. Whereas a community recreation center has a different focus. And I think we've talked about that at least in part in some of our meetings.
I don't know how many of these surveys you've done, and I'm thinking that it was a perfect time to do this survey this time of year. I don't know if that impacts, if you've seen that historically.
I'm not gonna lie, it worked out really well. If you ask people in the cold of winter if they want indoor recreation, they have thoughts and feelings about it. You know, it's funny. I've probably done about 15 to 20 of these surveys so far. And yes, time of year matters, but also you all just have a very engaged citizen group, which I think is, as I mentioned, incredible. And again, passionate about what they'd like to see within the community.
That does bring up a question, Whitney. I hadn't even thought about that, Josh, but when was that Ogden study done? Do you remember?
I would have to look and see. That one also was a wintertime survey. I think it was done in February. It was
Okay.
February, like it started late January and it went through early March, if I recall correctly.
So that still adds credibility, not detracts from it then.
Correct.
This
Thank
was a
you.
light winter. It was a
It
mild
was.
winter.
That's right.
If you would have asked 2 years ago or 8 years ago, or but yeah, a lot of times when we think about winter, we think, oh, that's one season, but Cache Valley winters 5 to 6 months sometimes. So
Sometimes 7. We
That's Rod.
started soccer in May and baseball in June.
yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, if you
I have
don't have
other
any
questions, but I don't know if
questions,
there'll be other times. I mean, more so questions, maybe not so regarding the survey results, but I don't know. I don't want to go off. Keep going.
The agenda, we can explore it.
I guess around pools. So, and I know we've discussed this, and Chad's worked a lot with like the school district or the athletic directors. Has there been some discussion? I know currently, and I've got everybody's water polo attention over there, but Mountain Crest or the pool up at Mountain Crest supports Ridgeline, correct? And I believe Green Canyon goes to Skyview. Has there been some discussion particularly or specifically with pools with the school district or with Ridgeline in particular?
Yeah, Justin and I did meet with Ridgeline, and we didn't talk extensively about aquatics, but I followed up and I went to an athletic director's meeting, and the superintendent over athletics did communicate that if a pool were built in the valley, they would consider some sort of a long-term rental scenario. They're not interested in building, owning, or maintaining a pool, but they're interested in utilizing a pool, at least at the time that we had that discussion. So that has been explored in part. And we'll talk about this later, but we'll be reporting back to them the findings, and we'll explore possibilities and opportunities as they present themselves.
Where does Logan swim? USU. I'm learning.
We had a stakeholder meeting here at Nibley City a couple years ago, and school district people were there, and the sorry, let me get my words right. The school district person over purchasing things, he actually lives in Nibley, and he said, no, the school district is not interested in having their own pool.
One thing that's related that we might mention is that especially spring sports, because of when they have tryouts, they're very, very interested in indoor space, for the most part, turf, to start their season. And that's a definite need. And I believe that was soccer and lacrosse. Am I missing something? Yeah, so there's definite interest in a long-term rental scenario or situation or agreement with the district for particular sports or with high schools or teams individually. So that's definitely been demonstrated.
I guess
We,
one
we
more.
might note that a high school umpire has just entered the building and he could probably speak to this very question. And he didn't hear me, but that's okay. Mayor Jacobson is here. Sorry, Josh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to share, I guess, a conversation that I had, and I wouldn't call him a naysayer, just somebody who's concerned and I know filled out the survey, talking about the proper role of government or the proper role of public versus private. And somebody kind of gave me this line or this thought that I hadn't considered was an indoor rec center is a public park that's heated and with walls. So it was kind of a discussion of, well, is it the proper role of the city to provide a public park? And it was kind of like, well, I don't know. We never really considered that. So I'm not saying that we need to go out and educate, but maybe at times we do and understand that that it already fits in with what the city provides for public parks and public space, and the public comment period about mental health, especially through that 5 to 7 month winter that we talked about. So.
All right, thank you. Appreciate everyone's comments, and thank you, Wendy, for that presentation. All right, next on the agenda is discussion and consideration of support and cooperation with surrounding communities considering indoor recreation options, including an introduction to potential alignment options for general consideration. And I will turn the time over to Chad.
Thank you, Kendall, for that. And Michael, I believe this will answer your question, at least in part. And so just to begin, and by the way, I might mention that Sandy Goodlander is here. She is with the Cache County Council, and I saw her at a Logan open house, and she said, boy, I'd like to learn more about your project, and we appreciate her being here with us. So as many of you know, there's really three main facilities that our valley has access to. The Logan City Recreation Center, which is adjacent to, really connected to the Logan High School, is the access to that is going away very soon in July 1st. What's interesting is they've reported that 49% of the use of that facility is from non-residents, people outside of Logan. And I would suspect that that facility is closest to the south end. And so a lot of our community, and when I say community, I mean the south end of the valley, is likely utilizing that facility. I did learn something interesting. Their hours for the next 3 years, there will be very, very limited access to the facility to the tune of aerobics rooms, 3 racquetball courts, a small gym, and I believe tennis and a walking track. However, those are now limited to Monday through Friday, 5:30 to 9:30 p.m. and Saturdays from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. However, their recreation department did admit that that could be very easily modified by the high school at any point. So nonetheless, our access, our youth playing junior jazz basketball will not have the same access to that. And in fact, it would likely be limited to Logan residents only for junior jazz. So that was an interesting thing that I learned. We're also aware of the the Smithfield Recreation Center, also connected to the high school. And then we have the Hanson Family Sports Complex, which realistically is a public-private partnership with the Hanson Family Foundation. And it's really a field house, and a beautiful, wonderful field house, large turf space. But the reality is there is no recreation space that is solely owned by the public. There's either a public-public partnership in the case of the high schools or a public-private partnership. And all of those facilities have reported that they have more demand for the space, and that actually includes Logan, than they have space available, which is interesting. And we're learning more about that now. So one thing that I think is very interesting to look at is this. If we take a look at the Cache Valley population, roughly a third, especially when we include the unincorporated county that is connected to many of our communities, is from the south end of the valley. And as we've discussed already, the distribution of public access recreation centers is on the north end of the valley. We've got, Smithfield, North Logan. Logan is changing, and all of them are either on the edge or beyond that 15-minute drive time that it looks like our community prefers, or at least the south end prefers. And at times that 15-minute can be a half hour or more to get to North Logan. So that's something that we've considered for some time. But we're also considering that we have a sizable population, especially when we combine communities. So where are we at with communities? As has been mentioned, there have been several communities on the south end of the valley that participated in this very survey. And you see those above the black line. Millville chose to opt out, at least at this time, in terms of the survey. But the question that we have for this body, and this is in part why we're combined, is what would cooperation look like between the cities on the south end? Would we consider or explore cooperation with other cities in the middle or even on the north end to create recreation opportunities for our community and our friends in the surrounding communities? So that's really the question that we need to explore. And these are some things to consider. So one option that we have is we can just go alone. We can say, well, we're going to build a Nibley facility. The reality is it would take us less time to pull that off. However, we have far less resources if it's just our community. We could combine forces, so to speak, with 2 or more communities, create a special service district. And I'll ask for some help on definition about special service district in just a moment. But it would take a little more time to create. We would have more resources depending on how many, decide to join. However, it does create more opportunity. The other option is to look at a county solution and do something cooperatively with the entire county. We would anticipate that would take significantly more time. However, we would have the maximum number of resources, and we'll outline some details on that. But before I go too far, Nick Kenska, who nearly made it to our Parks and Rec committee, he was a candidate, but he was stolen for the planning and zoning, but he has some specific experience in terms of special service districts and taxing. And if he wouldn't mind taking a minute to just share what he's learned, I asked him a question that I was curious about. So if we could hand him the mic, that would be helpful.
Hello, Nick Kenska, 587 West, 3600 South. I'm not here to talk about pools. Sorry, unless and I need to. I'm in support of, joking. So I work at the Utah State Tax Commission, have a little bit of experience with special service districts and taxing entities, things like that. And lucky for us, in this context, this is not a new idea, right? So there's plenty of recreation special service districts throughout the state. I'm going to bore you of the details. We'll talk very high level now, but essentially a district like this would come under what's called a 17D special service district. And there's obviously rules involved and different things like that. Essentially, there'd be like a board elected to create the district. It'd have to be registered with the Lieutenant Governor's office, and that would have to go to a vote of the people to create the district. And then once the district's created, then essentially that just triggers different mechanisms in terms of what a bonding situation looks like and so on and so forth. Just like any other district, like think of like an HOA as an example. HOA has a budget. It gets voted on by the residents of the HOA, something very similar to that. What's cool with special service districts is essentially just like in this context, right, where you can have multiple communities that would participate, and those communities would essentially have to go vote again to enact upon the special service districts and be a part of it as well. And so, but effectively, then once the district is voted upon and enacted, and then that's when basically you'd come up with a bond, right? And then you kind of work backwards from there in terms of how long is the bond, what are the terms, different things like that. And then that's basically how you would collect property taxes at a specific rate going forward. And just like Nibley City has to go through truth and taxation, different things like that, it's no different in terms of the rates. And we won't get into the weeds with that. But essentially, there's a model out there already that exists for many communities that have special service districts for recreation. So I'd advise if that's something that this board and the city and surrounding cities want to explore, there's plenty of options out there to look at as far as models. And so, yeah, there's plenty of, like I said, recreation-based service districts for this purpose actually in Utah that were created to build a rec center. So we would have an advantage there, I think. You look like you have a question. Shoot.
So I hate to stand up at the mic, but Nick, I mean, thank you. Don't go away because you have to answer this question. The timing. And so when you said there would be a vote to create the district, is that a referendum vote on the ballot or is that elected official vote?
I think it's the ballot.
Okay.
So Nick, your understanding is that you create the district first and then you go to bond?
Yeah.
Is that how you understand it? Okay.
So
And it all depends on if it passes by a vote.
and so I'm not arguing at all, Nick. We created a special service district to collect trash. And we did that by the representatives of the citizens as opposed to the citizens. Now, that district has limitations. It's their own bylaws that keep that special service district from taking out bonds, from borrowing money, et cetera, et cetera. But this is something for us to figure out because there's only so many election cycles, right? The next municipal election cycle will be this November. There'll be another one in 2 years. And if we're trying to do something on a referendum, then we have to first create the district by the people, which I'm not arguing with, but then we also have to create the debt by a vote of the people. That's just something for us to keep our eye on. Okay.
Definitely,
If
yeah.
if we
Great
go
point.
that middle route. Thanks, Nick. I appreciate the information.
Yeah, thank you. That was my question as well. And I don't know if Whitney's still on, but is that your understanding, Whitney, if you are still on?
Yes, sorry, my camera is not working, but that is my understanding.
Wonderful. Thank you for confirming that.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So let me just kind of outline some considerations for each of these three options for these bodies here present. So as mentioned, the Nibley only is the fastest. We have full control. Obviously, we're going to be close to Nibley residents. It would be in our town. We're very likely to secure a bond based on the 5 times that we've asked our community if you want indoor recreation. It might be 6 actually. The challenge is, and this has already been mentioned, we would likely exceed the demand from the moment we build it. And that may include the demand for just Nibley residents. So it's, and obviously Ballard and King would help us explore that. But in our general estimation, whatever we might be able to afford to build right now would likely be exceeded. However, independently, we could easily explore public-private partnerships that could maybe supplement some space available to the public. We could also look at kind of putting a stake in the ground, creating a space where others may come later. If there was a county effort or other cities decide later, let's create a special service district, we would already have a space to add on or expand offerings. A special service district, lots of advantages. Go ahead, sorry.
Maybe it's because I just came from umpiring a baseball game. I'm ready to have discussions and argue about stuff, right?
Just make the call.
Clearly, he was violating the runner's lane. He should be called out for runner's lane. If we go back to slide chat, I'm
Yes.
not arguing with you. I promise I'm not arguing with you. But one of the things I have learned as mayor is never pretend to know what the council's going to do.
Yes.
And never pretend to know what the citizens will do if we put something to a vote. So I think there is no such thing as likely to secure. And again, I'm arguing about words, but I think that we will have a more healthy approach to all of this. And in fact, our citizens and the whole, anyone who sees this on a ballot will feel better about knowing that I mean, I certainly don't consider this a slam dunk. If we want this to happen, it's got to be such a great proposal that people vote for it. And I mean, even random polls that go out and try to predict how elections are going to go, as we found out, it might go a little different than they suspect. So I'm just saying,
Yeah, that's,
I would probably tone that statement back a little bit. There's no likely anything. We're just trying to figure it out.
yeah, nothing is certain. That's for sure. I appreciate you making that call, Mayor. Hope to not strike out on the rest of the presentation, but yeah, you're absolutely right. Nothing is absolutely certain. So in terms of the special service district option, has been mentioned by Nick, there's lots of examples. South Davis Rec Center, the Kearns Ochre Mountain, there's some things happening in Park City and others. So that there's certainly some precedents there, and we can learn a lot of lessons from them. The advantages in combining efforts is we simply have more resources. We're likely to get a larger facility. We can meet more needs. Depending on who we partner with, it could still be close to Nibley, perhaps even be in Nibley. The challenges are we lose some control of the facility. However, we could still potentially pursue public-private partnerships and something down the road if other things come together. In terms of a kind of more of a county-wide combined solution, the advantages are clear. We would have the maximum number of resources if a bond is passed. That would result in the largest facility or facilities if there's more than one, and there's some debate already about that. We're more likely to meet the needs of the valley-wide. The challenge is for a small city like ours is we would likely have little to no control. And I know some of the communities that we've already spoken to have concern just, looking at combining forces with us. This is by far the longest timeline in terms of the creation. There's definitely a question of location, who would operate it, who would manage it. The county's already expressed this, that they have no experience in indoor recreation. They don't have a recreation department. And currently they have not expressed interest in creating one. And so it would likely be a special service district scenario for the entire county. So those are really the three general options. There could potentially be some combinations of those, and I should plug my, let me plug that in fast. You got one? Okay. I have one right here. Do you want to plug in the extension cord that's underneath there? Yeah, the worst thing that could happen is we could just lose this whole thing and have to reconnect. Yeah, that would be perfect. Okay. There you go. Thank you, Justin. Okay, fully powered now. So I guess really and this is quite honestly my recommendation in terms of what I would consider proceeding with, at least right now, is looking at a South Special Service District. And the reasons are listed there. Clearly, we've made the point that the south end of the valley is underserved. I personally do feel, and in talking with my colleagues, that local service is better service. We would have reasonable control over a space. I feel like it's a reasonable timeline to create something, and we still have some options to exercise. So that would be my suggestion or recommendation, but that's certainly something both of these bodies could explore and debate and discuss. So the real question is, again, who would we cooperate with? We already have a relationship with Hiram City and Wellsville in terms of serving their community for youth sports especially. And that has gone very well for us. We do have some connections with the other cities on the south end of the valley, and they have participated in a survey, but the next step is exploring with them. The other question is, if if we went on our own and somebody else on the north or middle went on their own, are there other ways that we could intersect and cooperate and work together? So the other thing that's come out of some of these discussions, especially internally and including discussions we've had with the Parks and Recreation Committee, is we foresee the possibility of creating a recreation campus. And on that campus, you may have a community recreation center. And across the parking lot, or maybe even adjacent to it, you have a private facility, and maybe it's a youth sports league that's put together a turf field in a metal building. If the school decided, hey, you know what, we are short facilities for our high schools, could we perhaps join the effort? And there's really a lot of advantages in terms of co-locating recreation. And a special service district could help facilitate that. And having a sufficient piece of land could certainly facilitate that. The other thing that it also creates is perhaps an opportunity to accommodate more in terms of economic development and picking up travel and tourism dollars. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. The reality is, if this were to be the case and the focus, it would have to be phased. It would have to be kind of master planned. And so that's something that would have to be considered. So those are really the points that I wanted to make in terms of that topic. And when you're ready, happy to move forward with item number 6. And Kendall or City Council, I'm happy to use the backspace to look at any of these slides if you want to have discussions on those.
There was a question, and I don't know if that's.
If you wouldn't mind speaking to the mic, just so everyone.
There was a
online
question from the public. I was just wondering if that is still have a question and if that is still allowed.
That's really up to Kendall if she wants to address that or entertain that.
Over there.
You still have a question?
Giving at us, I guess, right? If you wouldn't mind, we're going to hand you a mic just so we make sure we don't lose your question. Yeah, tell us who you are.
My name's John Pierce. I live here in Nibley, 3138. We just moved, so give me a second.
Nibley's great.
We'll find you.
South 1250 West, just down the street here. As we were going through the numbers, I didn't see any projections of population growth. The data that we're using was 2020 census.
Yeah.
What does that look like in relation to providing funding for this future effort? I think there was another question, but I forgot. So we'll just go with that one for now. And thank you.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And that's something that we discussed with VCBO. I believe, and I wish our city planner was here, but I believe Cache County grows 2% per year. And this graph happens to kind of highlight that. And so that's a consideration in terms of how do we accommodate that, looking forward inside of a facility. But then that also creates potentially some more funding sources if we have more people. The other thing that I might mention that I forgot to point out is there is cost in waiting. The longer that we wait, the more expensive it is to create a space. The last time I remember a turn down in the construction was 2008, I believe, which is quite some time ago. So that's definitely been something of concern that we've discussed in the Parks and Recreation Committee, at least. So I'm gonna have to.
I remember my question. So my second question was, with the flow of traffic, most of the traffic flows into the city through the south end. So is there any way to capitalize, or is that taken into consideration when we're talking about a rec center? Because people can be coming by it. It's not necessarily everyone living on the north end, it's coming through the south end to get to the larger population base of south. So how does that weigh into what we're doing? I mean, to me, it makes sense. I don't have the data that's going to draw additional people on the way home or going someplace, stop by the rec center, have a good time for a few hours, and then go home. And I came late, sorry, but just want to chime in one more thing. My kids are actively in sports. I have 3 kids that play water polo, but they also swim. And we're at a lot of these other rec centers all the time, especially in the winter, and they are packed. People are using them. My sister lives in Springville. She lives right next to the rec center. She's there every single day with her young kids. It's, I know, I find it hard to believe that this could be a loss for the community. Maybe financially, there's more considerations. I'll grant that, but overall health for the community, I can't help but think this is a real win. Thank you.
I can address his first question about location. If you think of the school board, they're a public entity, Nibley City, or I mean, school district. I always get, anyways, we're a public entity with public, like they're building a middle school in the middle of Nibley because that's where they own land. And they're building their middle school and elementary school on the north end because they already own the land. Nibley already owns land. And so when we already own the land, then that cuts down on the cost. Even though it may not be right on the highway, you may have to come off just a little bit to get to it. But yes, the location is key. But it's where do we own the land? If we didn't own land, where can we acquire land? So that's part of that consideration as far as location.
I think I see somebody else waving at you. I will say that site selection is a part of this study. And so that's definitely going to be explored.
Sorry, I just want to drop a comment on the land issue. The comment that I've made, and I've got my boss is from back east. Sounds weird right here all of a sudden.
It's just really loud.
like
You
it.
could step back and it'll still
Holy
pick you
crap,
up.
that was weird. Anyway, so my boss from back east, but he lives here in Nibley now. The comment that he and I were bouncing off each other the other day is I'm coming to the thought of this needs to be something that can be like a community center, not just like a recreation center. Where's Main Street in Nibley? Can anybody answer that question? Is it 165? Is it 3,200? Is it 800?
Main Street is 165.
Yeah, Nibley doesn't, I don't feel like we have a character. We don't have a place that we can call our own in Nibley. If we do something like this, that can be a community center for us. To me, it gives us something to rally around, right? Like we do the parade down 800 West, but that's not Main Street. Is that Main Street? I don't know. Is this Main Street? It feels weird. That's why I feel like this gives us a heart.
Thank you.
Yeah, recreation centers can definitely be an anchor. I think Justin wants to say something to that point.
Not exactly to that point, but to the point of having discussion as you think about, as you decide versus small versus big district or whatnot, but just crunching some numbers here pretty quick. $35 million bond, if we want to aim high at $20 per household, is an annual payment of just over $2 million at about 400,000 to 500,000 operational costs. That is 10,500 homes need to pay $20 a month to cover that annual payment, if that makes sense. So that's about 4.4 times as many homes as Nibley City has in it right now. Is that tracking? Does that make sense?
Mhm.
That's it here.
Current household.
He
About 24.
said current numbers. Yeah. So you can see the need for cooperation with other communities just based on those rough numbers. And I think that answers your question specifically, right, Michael?
Well, kind of, because what we do when we say that, and this is what we talked about before, is we're talking about a cost that in order to fill what we believe we want right now, within the control of the number of people that want to use it, and will therefore not feel like it's overused or they can't get in because there's too many people, we're over 4 times the cost of getting that. So by lowering the cost, including more people, say we get Hiram and Wellsville and Mendon and River Heights and Millville and everybody else jumps on, well, now we've lowered the cost back to where we think it's okay, but we've
Added
times the
population,
number
yeah.
of people. And so we're now at a facility that doesn't fill the needs potentially anymore. It's just that mismatch of what we say we want and how much we want to use it versus what it's going to cost, what we're willing to pay.
Yeah, and where is that balance? And I guess related to that question is, if we went on our own, we know, and North Logan knows this very well,
Yep.
Everyone's going to want in, even if we have a non-resident fee, for teams or individuals coming into a facility, it would be utilized. extensively. So
I
anyway,
think we have proof of that everywhere, right? We've talked
Right.
about this a lot, but no matter what we build, there's going to be more interest in it than what it can actually support.
right.
So the question is, where do the charges then represent that interest? And what does that actually mean for the people who are paying for it?
Unfortunately, we have Ballard and King to help us navigate that, and they've done that countless times. So yeah, great point, great questions.
Was there another comment over there? Yeah. Yeah, please.
I'm Sandy Goodlander from the Cache County Council. One thing that I wanted to make sure when we do our county study, and that I think you guys should be very clear about with your residents as you go through this process, like they're saying they would pay an extra $20 a month in their property taxes or whatever to build something like this. The other component of that is every recreation center, government-owned recreation center in the state charges a fee to use it. Do the residents really understand that if they pay for it with their property taxes, they're still going to have to pay a membership fee to use it, a family membership fee? I was just at the Provo Recreation Center. Their city built one. Today I went down there, and it's about $500 a year, $550 for a family to use it. So that other component of that question, would you pay this much in your property taxes? But do you also understand that there will be a fee to use the facility, to make sure people understand that, so they're not shocked, like, oh, well, wait a minute, I said I'd pay for it. You're going to charge me to use it, and just make sure that's understood. So I think that's important.
Yeah, that definitely has to be clear. And that happens when a bond is presented, that folks would have those numbers. You would pay this much in your property tax. We anticipate these being the fees for membership or daily use or non-resident use based on the pro forma that Ballard and King puts together. Yeah, critical piece. Thank you, Sandy.
Okay. Anything else? I think we're good to move on to our next agenda item. Indoor recreation feasibility study, next steps and timeline discussion and consideration, reporting back to stakeholders, visioning and concept creation, focus group considerations, funding mechanisms, including the consideration plan for public-private partnerships. Go ahead, Chad.
It's a lot of stuff.
Oh man, it's a mouthful. Those are some big words.
All right, so we'll jump into this. I checked this timeline with Whitney this morning, if she's still on and has any other feedback about this, but this is our current timeline. It may be adjusted based on what we just learned about special service districts, if that's the route that's determined we need to pursue. We've finalized, I'm going to put quotes around that, data collection. Clearly, people want to make their voice heard, and they've continued the conversation. At this point, we're reporting back to stakeholders, and that includes surrounding communities. It includes the school district. It includes youth sports teams that are interested in long-term rental scenarios. In April, basically next week, we'll explore facility concepts and hopefully narrow that to one in May. Once we have that single concept, as I explained to Aaron, we will be able to put numbers together in terms of what is it going to cost the property owner in terms of property tax? What will it be for their membership if they choose to purchase that? And what would it be if they decided to just come, on a daily basis and pay the daily fee? On August 16th is a firm deadline. That is when we would have to decide if we're going to put together bond language. Again, that may be modified depending on special service district. And then the election is in November. And so that would be on the ballot potentially for participating communities. And that could be just Nibley, it could be Nibley and others, depending on the direction we decide to go. So that's general timeline. So what does reporting back to communities look like? Obviously, we're having a discussion today. April 2nd, VCBO and I will be in Wellsville, May 1st in Hiram, and May 8th in Mendon. The others, we're working out a schedule. If Millville were to request information or got curious about what we're doing, we're happy to share the information that we have with them. But they've declined it so far at this point. So that's the local areas in terms of the south end. in terms of reporting back. Reporting back to the school district, again, we'll talk to the athletic directors that we've had discussions with, coaches that have been interested, as well as youth sports programs that have reached out to us and provided some of their feedback and expressed some of their interests. Really the next step, and this is where we lean heavily on VCBO, is that visioning piece. And they have tremendous experience in this. Lots of recreation centers under their belt, including the Provo Recreation Center that Sandy mentioned, and actually worked there. That's where I started my recreation career. But they're going to look at, hey, how big should this be? What amenities do we need in it? How does it flow? How does it fit together? And we really have the best of the best to do that. We've already talked about Ballard and King and what their role is. One very important thing, especially in our current environment, is looking at the cost to build. And that is a challenging thing to put your finger on in the current economy. But Construction Control Corporation has a lot of experience in that. So those are next steps. As been mentioned, the plan is to do focus groups with at least the seniors. Depending on the direction that we go, we may have other conversations with performing arts, with aquatics folks, and perhaps others. But those are potential next steps to kind of refine some of the questions that we have. We need to figure out that indoor-outdoor pool if we're going to pursue it. Did you have something you want to share, Justin, or are you just waving? Okay.
We're telling Aaron bye. Aaron stepped out.
In terms of funding mechanisms, and this is really kind of a summary, but these are the most common. For community recreation centers, the most common funding is a general obligation bond. We've already talked about membership fees. One thing that Provo City does very well at is pursuing corporate memberships with businesses as a kind of health and wellness benefit. A facility rental can be a tremendous benefit for a facility. In Nephi, they built something called the Hive, and they pay for all of their operational costs with, I think, 3 tournaments. And so we could explore a model like that potentially, even on our own if we had the right funding and the right facility. However, we have to consider access to the public. Already been mentioned, sponsorship, naming rights, donations, grants. In terms of travel and tourism, they would look at funding something if it's a facility that would accommodate people coming from out of town. We've talked about public-public partnerships. I don't know that I personally would recommend that based on what we've talked about, other than long-term rental agreements. Sharing a facility is difficult. Public-private partnerships, we have become acquainted with lots of opportunities that we hope to kind of hone in on and better understand how they might fit. And I'll explain how that might work. So the reality is and we've mostly been approached from youth sports organizations that may want to co-locate with us or utilize facilities as well as others. But the idea is we put out a request for proposals, and my colleagues in Arizona have done this and other places. And we asked them, if you build a facility next to or near ours, what would the percentage of public use be? And generally, we get credit for land that they put that on if it's on our public land. And we look for a win-win in that case. So quite honestly, there's a lot of opportunities here. It's just a matter of what would be the best one to contribute to the community and complement what we might want to do. And that's really it. Any questions for me before you have discussion?
Is it broken, Justin?
He said the battery's dead. Any questions, comments for Chad?
I have a sorry. I have a question, but I'm trying to look at the surveys, and this might be more for Whitney. It reminded me of the various surveys that were available. Wondering what the response has been from private businesses, as well as I'm trying to remember. There was the public one, and then there was businesses, and then youth sports, or is that the same one?
Nope, you're exactly right. So we had a public survey We had great response. We had about, 25 responses on our youth sports programs. And the majority of the folks from the various youth sports organizations are interested in renting space in the facility. We had one or two folks who responded to that survey say that they might be able to help support some upfront costs. But for the most part, the respondents wanted indoor recreation space available that they could rent to use for their youth sports programs. Unfortunately, on the business survey, we did not get a good response rate. I think we had one response and it may have been Chad testing it out. So,
There was
Favorable.
a physical therapist that was interested, and I presume that I think he did complete that anyway.
yeah, okay. I'll circle back and look at that one. I think that that one was a good opportunity. We did have some really good conversations with potential businesses in our stakeholder engagement that I think were great discussions to follow up on. And so we had sort of those three distinct surveys. We had the businesses, we had the youth sports, and then at the very end, we did add a survey for groups that were not youth sports organizations, but community groups that might be interested in using the space. And we do have a handful of responses there. I need to circle back to that one. I have not looked at it in the last 2 weeks, but I think that there were 3 or 4 responses on that survey as well.
Yeah, I did find the page, other director survey that was not athlete or sports, but yeah, that's good feedback.
Yep. And then the other thing that we did talk about at the end of this process that I did want to note as well is if the city does decide that they want to form a special service district and go to bond, we have discussed the potential of doing a statistically valid voter-based survey. And that survey, what we have been doing is very much a open community input series or survey. Anybody with a link can jump on, take the survey. They can share it with folks in their household. People can provide feedback on an ongoing basis. It's very open and accessible to the public. A statistically valid survey would reach out to specific voters and voter groups within the community. And it would very clearly, as we had talk about the potential facility, the cost to construct the facility, the cost to operate the facility, the ongoing tax impact, and the membership costs for that as well, to gauge interest in whether or not folks are willing to pass a bond. And so that's something that would make a lot of sense prior to going to bond, just to really be rooted in the perspective of the community once they have that additional information at hand.
Thank you.
I guess one thing that I might mention is for both of these bodies is if there's any direction in terms of how we might proceed moving forward as a staff, we just appreciate that. So far, it's been just keep going. Don't stop now. And if there's another message, we'd like to hear it. But otherwise, we'll just continue with what we've been doing.
Yes. Umpire, please. Yeah, for sure.
So I appreciate, Whitney, so much how much, the help that you have given us on trying to figure out this question of scale. So thank you so much, Chad. You understand that. We've talked about it tonight. Sandy, you're here trying to help us figure that out. The question of scale, the question of scale. What can we build and what can we afford to build, right? So this is why I don't get invited to parties anymore, because I'm just a worst caser. Maybe it's the umpire, engineer, I don't know, but I'm just thinking what could screw us up? What could screw us up? How do we?
You're a realist.
And I'm getting the feeling that we may be going into a referendum still answering the question of scale, because I'm not sure how to ask a black and white question of the voters to say, would you pay this much money to build this facility? And by the way, it's going to take this much money to operate the facility. Therefore, we anticipate this kind of fee. But it may not be that black and white of a question. It might be that as a voter, I envision that there's going to be a pool for water polo, and I'll vote yes for that. But if the surrounding communities, right, don't get on board with us, then we might be still trying to figure out scale, right? So now we can't afford to build that. And then people that voted yes for something conditional on it being that thing are now disappointed. I don't know if that, what that does legally to the referendum and everything else, but I'm trying to, if I put it in a nutshell, I'm trying to figure out how because I believe these referendums have to be very simple. They have to be very direct. They have to be very black and white. Would you pay this much money to build this facility? The question I'm trying to figure out if we can ask, or less money to build something smaller if other communities don't get on board with us, or more money, to build something bigger. If Whitney, do you have any experience on that, on how we can actually go to a referendum on that question of scale still being on the table?
So in all of the work that I've done over the years, we have never gone out to the public for a referendum or for funding without understanding scale, budget, and tax base. And so the first question is which communities want to participate in this? What is the tax base? Knowing that tax base, we work with bond advisors to say this is the amount of money that could be available from that tax base based off of the feedback we've gotten from the community. And then as an architecture and planning firm, we then say, this is the size of facility that you can get for those dollars. And so I think those three, to your point, Mayor, those three questions absolutely need to be answered. Who's the tax base? How much
Right.
tax
And
potential
am
is
I
there?
making sense when I worry that it's not a guaranteed tax base? Because I mean,
I think-
maybe we ask the question, every community, maybe the question is every community has to say, yes, we're on board with this in order to do it.
Or the communities who have said yes. And that becomes your special service district, right?
Well, we may not know what communities actually say yes until their voters go into a balloting session. I mean, we can survey, we know what we know, and I always worry about, as I said before, what are the voters actually going to approve?
Right.
So are we already behind because we don't have a special service district now? Do we need to vote on the special service district?
Well, yeah, that's a great question that Nick brought up. Nick Kenska brought up is, do we have to do a vote of, do we have to do a referendum to form the special service district? We have to figure that out. I don't know. Now we're getting into attorney stuff, and I don't wear that hat. So we have to figure that out. And that's all about the timing, right? I think we've covered that. We need to figure that timing out. And I mean, I would love it if we know that we can ask the voters a black and white question. Would you pay this much money to build this facility and pay for this many years? And then if Hiram says, no, we're not doing it, what do we do then? Right? Build something smaller for less money, but that's not what people voted on. Okay, I'm not trying to be pessimistic. I'm just trying to figure out how we get this thing done.
I kind of counter to that. What's the risk? Like, we put it to a vote, they say no, we dissolve the district. I mean, is that really all that happens? I mean, those who want the rec center maybe don't get it, or we get something smaller, we put it to another vote of, well, then are you willing to pay this amount for this facility? Again, if they say no, then there's not really the negative is we don't get what this room clearly wants. But I don't necessarily see that there's we don't lose much by.
Yeah, great points. If I understand right, what you're asking, Kaylin. So first of all, just from a practical point of view, elections are expensive. And it's going to cost us money to do an election every 2 years. But we do elections every 2 years, municipal elections every 2 years anyway. but I'm not sure that we can iterate on this question of a referendum very many times. Number one, before people get tired of it, it's like,
Right.
we said no, and why are you still asking us, right? And then if we don't understand, if we don't get the answer on this November, we could ask a different question next November. Sorry, 2 years from November, and it just takes a long time. You know the demand.
Sure.
You know, and so.
Yeah, my thought is though, I mean, yeah, maybe we ask twice, maybe it's just once. If they say no and it's a resounding no, that's kind of our answer. And maybe we say, okay, well, indoor rec space, it's not going to happen that way through taxpayer money.
And I think we need to talk to an attorney about what if we get 3 communities that say yes and 1 that says no.
Yeah.
And the people in the communities that voted yes say, wait a minute, I voted for that. I voted for a pool. And now you're telling me you can't afford to build a pool because only 3 communities voted yes.
And we kind of talked about this in a previous meeting, I feel like, where it was kind of an all or nothing. So if one community didn't, then, or I guess it wasn't by community, it was by percentage. So maybe one community didn't, but it was still the majority of people. That's kind of what I remember talking about, is it was like an all or nothing type deal with whoever was voting on it. Is
Right.
that correct?
First of all, I'm a best case scenario person. You know that. And that's why we balance each
On
other.
average, we got it.
And Justin and I have had conversations about this.
And we're
Yeah.
right there.
And we make a great combination. But I think Whitney answered it. We would not put that in front of the people until we know already what that base is. So if let's say there's 4 communities we approach and 1 drops out and says, you know, we don't want to go all the way to bond with you, then we would adjust that center, that design, that ask to match those that are voting on it. Does that make sense? Do I have that right, Whitney? Like, we have to have that tax base figured out first before we put it in front of them.
Yeah, but that's a decision of the governing body to put it in front of the citizens. And if the city council of Hiram says, no, we're out, then we know we're out. But if the city council of Hiram says, yes, we will put this on the ballot, we actually don't know if Hiram is in or out until their citizens vote. And then we count the citizen votes.
But it's not, because Hiram citizens predominantly said no, doesn't mean that the bond doesn't pass, right? It's a general obligation bond that requires a majority. So if of the citizens that are in that district, those who voted against it, then it doesn't pass. If the majority vote for it, then you get it, right?
So it's an all or nothing, like we talked about. Yeah.
Forget about jurisdictional boundaries is what we're saying. The
Correct.
jurisdictional boundary is the special service district that was either created by a vote or would be supported by a bond. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, we had that very
I think I
same
asked that question before, and
Yeah.
I will give you credit for being consistent, Whitney. Thank you very much.
Well, that question has come up, and yeah, I'm glad we can understand it.
I have one more question and one more opinion that kind of mix into one. It wasn't until I actually took the survey, because anytime you think about a rec center, you probably think, oh, for sure it's going to have sports courts, it's going to have basketball courts. But I don't know, if you think about how many basketball courts are in Cache Valley, if you considered the schools and the churches, and I can go to any basketball court anytime I want if I know the right person, I guess, given the access to the building. The company that you were talking about, I know that is that the same one that we've discussed previously about evaluating the needs?
Ballard and King. Yes.
Ballard and King.
Yeah.
And do they consider like the schools and the churches as public access or no?
I think I know the answer, but Whitney will answer it.
Thank you, Whitney.
The answer is it depends. So churches typically no, because it's limited to who can use that facility, right? It's not considered public use. The schools, it would depend on if the schools have a program or an opportunity where the public can rent the space. but they'll evaluate the existing market, understand how many courts are available, and then they'll also look at, are those courts really available to the public or not? Or is it like you were saying, if you know the right person, and is that then really, publicly available
Public available.
space? Mhm.
Because I mean, I know it was an example, but when I went to the landing page for the survey, and I think you showed it on one of your slides, there's 30 basketball standards on the example for a community or rec center, and I'm just like, no, I wouldn't. I would have said no way to that when I wouldn't pay for it because it wouldn't serve necessarily my needs. But that's just my opinion, and it obviously doesn't override the results of the survey. So.
And the other thing that we do see, especially with community recreation facilities, is there's then a basketball program, right? Or a volleyball program, or whatever that thing is that, let's say it's like a junior jazz that needs a certain number of courts to operate. And that's another consideration, is how many courts do you need to serve the programs that you're also offering from a recreation perspective? So it's a combination of what's in the market, but also what programs or services are valued by your community.
Yeah, I forgot one of my questions, but you reminded me. And I guess one other point is I don't know how many people, when they think sports court, they think, well, yeah, I want a place to play pickleball. But if I'm going to play pickleball, I don't want it on a basketball gym floor. I want it on a pickleball flooring. And I don't know if that was separated out in the survey or not.
So pickleball was separated out, but it was also considered one of the court sports. And that's always a question that we get into as we refine the project, is what are the sports that are being offered in that gym, and what are the finishes or the flooring that's most appropriate. And Chad and I were joking before the meeting, the Clyde Recreation Center that has that blue floor that we showed a couple of different times, they specifically went to a sport court instead of a wood floor, so that their community could get broader use out of it. They could play pickleball. They weren't worried about if people brought food in to the space, versus a wood floor is something that you need to keep a little bit better eye on to make sure that it's well maintained over the years. And so that's always a great conversation. The basketball enthusiasts want wood, the flexible use people want sport court, and we can resolve that later.
And last one, and that's the one, this is the one you remind me of. Chad mentioned junior jazz. Is that program then not going to be able to utilize the Logan Rec Center? Is that included?
Yeah, I've asked both Logan and the junior jazz director at a conference that I attended. So junior jazz will be significantly reduced and is likely going to be just Logan residents and maybe even limited leagues. That's in part what drove us to explore the question, because we knew that they were servicing us for that program. In fact, at one point they said, Chad, please take this over. We have all of your kids from Nibley. And anyway, we take their soccer. But yeah, so junior jazz will be impacted significantly. And I don't know that the high school programs could fully assimilate them based on access to the courts that they have and when people would want to or need to play. So there's definitely a deficit there in terms of junior jazz. And junior jazz is very excited about the possibility of another space in Cache Valley to accommodate their program.
Yeah, I think the sports or the high school basketball programs really favor the competitive. And if you play during even their rec time, you're playing their competitive teams. And so I think junior jazz is just definitely a good service to the community. So.
Heather has a comment towards that.
Sorry, can I just be for a mic if that's all right, Heather? Sorry.
I have 9 kids. I don't need my.
Yeah. the YouTube recording needs it though.
You can hear me from paradise, I'm sure. Yeah. I just to speak a little bit to the pickleball, and you talk about public and private sector. I think that's where you really get some great cooperation and some partnerships, because where you especially if you're like a serious pickleball player and you're like, I don't want the multi-sport court, that's not going to work for me. You're going to your private sector. And as you start to work towards with public and private sectors and, your 3.0s, your beginners, they don't care if you have a they just want to come play and exercise. You may be some seniors who aren't as interested in, competition. But then you have a partnership with, private facilities that are for your 4.0s, your 4.5s that actually want to play on
sport court,
right? Not a general use sport court. So that's where you start to get these cooperations in with your facilities. Just really quickly to speak to pickleball, Green Canyon has a club ran by a really fantastic family in the valley that are huge into pickleball, have some pro players in their family. Mountain Crest is starting theirs back up and looking for a place for their pickleball club to go. Again, when we talk about spring sports, you talked about like only basketball. You're talking about tennis needs courts. You're talking about sport or, baseball, softball. Any spring sport is looking for an indoor facility starting in, December. And even, my daughters wrestle at Mountain Crest and we're in freestyle wrestling. Well, now we're competing with every other, boys volleyball, which just got sanctioned. You just constantly are competing with somebody at some place, whether you're in season or out of season of sport. So you really have some great partnerships with private facilities as they come up that can then also service your community members. Right, the rec center serves one need, private serves a different need, and they can work really well together.
Thank you, Heather. We discovered that as we toured the Farmington facility. Justin and I walked through that, and I've been through that several times, filled with pickleballers, and they're the 1s, 2s, and 3s in terms of play level. And then there's a private facility that takes care of the next level experience. And that's in general what a community recreation center does. We offer the introduction, the basic experience, and the private sector goes kind of next step or next level. And that's generally reflected in the fits and finishes of a facility. Great question, though.
All right. We will adjourn our combined city council meeting at
Nathan,
this
do you need
time.
to do that, or does that Kendall do that? Does she
Do I
shut your
get to
meeting
that, or
down?
I can give it back to you? I don't care. I don't know. This is my first real meeting.
We just elected
They
Kendall.
just elected me last month. Thank
And
you
I'm
very
so
much.
glad we did.
Great job. I'll just accept general consent from council members present to adjourn the portion involving city council. Seeing no objection, city council is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome to stay.
Thank you, Whitney.
So it is 8:30. As it says, to resume regular Nibley Parks and Rec Advisory Committee meeting, which would be a report on the spring, summer sports. How fast can you do that, Chad?
I think I can do it in 5 minutes or less.
Okay.
Should we try it?
Do
All right,
what?
let me find it.
Do we have to motion to go longer? We just go longer.
I think we usually motion.
It's up to you, but probably a good idea to motion.
Yes.
How would that be?
No, we never end at 8:30. What are you talking about?
Oh, we don't, but we're like, hey, let's talk about this next time.
Always.
We keep,
Not once.
we push things.
Yeah.
Almost always. All right, you ready? Should we fire through it? It's up to you guys. It's
Go.
I think
The timer just
I'm
started.
good at distracting, but I think I know why they had us up here is because there's an election this year and they're looking for. So I nominate.
No nominations. None.
I'd go.
Okay, I'm setting a timer. Ready, set, go.
Okay, let's go. So Royalty Academy pageant is May 16th and 17th. It looks like good numbers. Nibley Children's Theater still open in terms of signups. However, the speaking roles are taken.
I'm sure.
Indoor rec that just wrapped up tonight. 119 Super Start Soccer just wrapped up tonight. 119 participants. Great program. T-ball starts April 9th, and we have significantly more participants this year compared to last, but not quite as many as soccer. So doing well with that. We have over 1,000 participants in our spring soccer. We're breaking records. Utah State was here today to do a coach clinic. They'll be here to do a player clinic later in the season. People love our program. It's already been mentioned, but just really doing well. One thing I might mention, it might be on another slide, but roughly half, depending on the league, come from outside of Nibley City. So it's something that we might want to consider as we get short on fields. This is what the growth in spring soccer looks like, just spring soccer. I imagine we'll exceed 1250 next year easily. Fall is always less, but growing tremendously. This is what the growth last year looked like. We're likely to continue on that trend. Participation in softball, t-ball, baseball, so far at 350, we're working through waiting lists. In general, these programs do not grow tremendously. They kind of maintain a status quo in terms of participation, limited in part by availability of fields. High school softball still open, and it will be open until May 11th. So if you know high schoolers, I encourage them to participate. We do have an end of season party. Ultimate Frisbee opens beginning of April. So does Nerf Tag. Well, Nerf Tag at the end of April. Great program. That is a public-private partnership. Duck and Dodge offers the program. We do the registration, and really works beautifully for both of us. Youth Cross Country, great program, opens end of April. We have a lot of soccer players jumping into that one. Season July through August, 3 meets. Youth Council will open in April. And we're pretty good with soccer referees. We could always use more depending on their availability. Definitely need umpires. We're also looking for recreation specialists in terms of pickleball and youth cross country to support us. Yeah, there is Mayor Jacobson behind the plate. And we're also hiring field painters like we did last year. So if you know someone that's available during the day, during the week, they like to get paid to walk around and get some sunshine, we'd love to have them. Hopsicle run, middle of April. This is an opportunity for you to volunteer. Signups are going very well, ahead of where we were last year. Heritage Days, we've talked about this, but save that date. Another opportunity to volunteer. Questions? I broke a record, I think.
Yeah, 3.5 minutes.
Where do we
I
go
brought-
to sign up to help for events?
Good question.
Just-
I can send that to you. So I believe on the Hopsicle run, there is a little button that you can click on to sign up.
Okay.
It seems like you've done that before. You've helped with a fun run, but I can send you a direct link. I know that's probably easier. And the Heritage Days one is not set up yet.
Okay, but there's
So
usually a form to fill out.
usually a form on the event webpage. Great question.
I was going to joke around. I brought my son here to show that they honor the signs that are on the fields that do not get on. They actually went to a friend's house and weren't willing to play at the park, which I was like, just go play. It's fine. It's dry. But I
Thank
did
you.
notice that the soccer's out there. Are those signs going to be coming off soon?
They will, yeah. So I've been told that fields will open in April. So we just did a clinic today. We're
clinic.
checking out coach bags, and so beginning of April, Rod will let us out on the fields.
I know this week's great, and I know the weather's going to change again. So
That's really the issue. This weekend it changes significantly. We have the same situation with the pickleball courts. We'd love to open them, but as soon as we do, we'd have to close it. Other questions? All right, now it's your turn. I give you 2 extra minutes.
Number 7, committee member reports. Does anyone have a report?
I have a couple. I have been hosting global team members, one from Austria and one from Singapore. I took her to Morgan Farm and she said that was the highlight of her trip. So I did share that with Mike and Roxy Christensen as well. And they said feedback like that makes it all worth it. So Justin, thank you as well.
I worked at This Is the Place, and foreigners absolutely loved seeing a wagon. That was a highlight of their entire trip to the United States of America. They thought we were all cowboys.
She got selfies with about every animal that she possibly
Right.
could, and the cow licked her as she was taking the selfies.
Oh, wow. Experience.
Good job, cow.
Yep, that was awesome. And then I'll say this every meeting, residents would love a soccer goal at Clear Creek.
Send you the form.
Thank you, Chad.
Goals will be set up at Clear Creek this year. We have games playing there.
Nice.
So
No excuses, Eldon.
I have a quick comment, as far as it'll affect our community is the school board, school district. It will be changing boundaries.
Wow.
Will be changing in our area specifically. Well, even anyways, they'll be changing elementary boundaries and secondary boundaries.
With Logan School District?
Nope, no, not with Logan, just because we're getting this new middle school. And then with the magnet school, with the DLI moving to Spring Creek, elementary boundaries will shift.
So just
Second-
within Cache.
Within Cache,
Okay.
within Cache County. So our school district, North End will be affected too, because they're getting a new elementary school and a new middle school too. But Nibley will be affected.
So magnet school is official?
Yeah, that was official a year ago.
What's it called?
A magnet school.
Oh.
The Spanish program and the French program will both be at Spring Creek Elementary
Okay.
together with no other traditional English classes.
Interesting.
So that school will house those two languages. So, and that's a community thing, but the school district will be moving boundaries for, there are lots of stuff.
In case anyone's wondering, I'm very disappointed in that news.
Me
Why did it
too,
what?
me too. I'm trying to be neutral, but I don't like it either.
I am not neutral.
I'll just smile. Sorry. That's
Two
why I tell
more-
my kids, sorry,
two
I'll
more
give you a hug,
things.
but sorry, no.
They're not a member report, but Sarah needs a raise after tonight. All that typing.
She was sitting here, I was like, oh, I can't say anything because she is like typing a million.
Sarah,
Well,
we
then
have
when
you
I ask
backed
questions,
up
I'm
with
like, I don't
Cheryl
know.
also. So we've got you backed up with Cheryl. She's done the
That's
recording on
good,
this.
because I was
Yeah.
like, I hope I'm getting all the information.
And I am a little curious if there was I wanted to ask Whitney, but I also didn't want to prolong the meeting more than I already have, was was curious if there was an influx of responses after our last meeting. Because I know we made a big push to get the word out. And I know I shared it in every group meet that I felt that was appropriate. And I had a lot of people actually, after I shared it on Facebook, started the conversation, it kind of helped start the conversation even outside of social media. So if you have that, it's not a huge deal, but anyways.
I can look that up while you guys are finishing. The one thing that we did notice is that mass texts sent out by cities seem to create the biggest spikes.
Yeah.
And then there was also sustained activity when there were very active social media posts.
Yep.
But and we can actually look at the exact date if you ever were
It's all
curious,
good.
Josh.
You don't mind negative feedback because that makes your posts more.
Yeah, it drives more activity. It really does.
Like, oh, there's one crazy guy on there, but the rest all like it, so.
Boyd's not crazy. You just maybe haven't met him. Are we still recording?
Love Boyd. Neighbor to you guys, I guess, right?
Yeah.
No, we welcome any
Report?
comment.
All right, number 8, action items review, Sarah. I don't, I mean,
None? There are none. It was just mostly informational.
yeah.
There was an action
Do you
from
have an
last
action item
one.
there?
Yeah, there was one, like, the one to make sure you, oh, I didn't even put it on here, hold on.
Oh, from last one?
At the beginning, we review action items, right?
Yeah.
But it wasn't on here. That's why I missed it. It wasn't on the, there was no thing of action items. at the
Yeah, because it's
beginning.
below. They asked me to move that to our section of the meeting.
It was
Oh.
to ask for a budget increase for the royalty, the Nibley royalty next year. That was your only action item. from
That's
last
it.
meeting.
Oh, so that's that review right now. That's
Yeah.
not.
Feedback.
Oh, okay. So number 8 is discussion, or number 9, discussion consideration of action items, assignments moving forward. And that's the one where
So 8 is last meeting, 9 is
this
this meeting.
meeting.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna hit everything on the agenda. Just
First time in a long time. All right, next, number 10. Next meeting will be April 23rd. Put it on your calendar. Chad will remind you the day of, or maybe the day before.
Calendar invite well in advance.
All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
A second? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? You get to clean up. Meeting adjourned. That's
That's
a great question.
Right
He's like
here.
right there.
Oh, there we go. I was like, what?
I
My
look
brain
at it and
wasn't
I still
working.
don't know
Oh,
how to
thank
say
you.
it.
Kendall?
Thank you.